Here are some of the rules I'm just reviewing. d dx means the derivative with respect to x of a constant is 0. Number 1 was y equaled 5 or 8 or something, and its derivative, because it was a constant, would have been 0. Now, if you have the derivative of x with respect to x, it's 1. You can think of it as a slope of the line y equals x. Now, if you have x to the n, this is a common one called the power rule. You do power times base to the 1 less power. That's why it's n minus 1. I believe we also gave you the derivative of some of the trigs. The derivative of sine is going to be cosine. The derivative of cosine is going to equal negative sine. The derivative of all cofunctions are negative. So these are some of the rules that we're going to use to find derivatives. And currently we're working through the power, power sum, basically a differentiation PDF that I had you working on. Does anybody know what number 2 said? Okay, it was a power, constant, and sum worksheet. One rule I forgot to give you is the derivative of e to the x with respect to x is e to the x. It's the only thing whose derivative is itself. For number 2, you want to take the derivative. You mark it as f prime. Keep the 5 out as a constant factor. Power, base, 1 less power. 5 times 18 would be 50, and 40, I believe, would be 90. X to the 17th. And that's what the derivative should equal. Okay, number 3. You're going to take the derivative, dy dx. Keep the 4 out as a constant factor. Power, base, 1 less power. The derivative of x is 1, so that becomes 20x to the 4th plus 1. For number 4, you're going to take its derivative, indicated as y prime or dy dx. Keep the 4 out, power, base, 1 less power. The derivative of negative 5x, or the slope of negative 5x, is negative 5. And the derivative of a constant is 0. So this should be 16x to the 3rd minus 5. Okay, on to 5. Just find its derivative, indicated as dy dx. Keep the 3 out. Power, base is x, 1 less power. 4/4 less than 5/4 would be 1/4. Top times top is 15. Bottom times bottom is 4. X to the 1/4. You might know that the 1/4 power means the 4th root. So I would say either of these would be valid answers. On number 6, you're taking the derivative of y with respect to x, and you're going to do power, base is x, 1 less power. 3/3 less than 2/3 is negative 1/3. So that's 10 over 12, top times top, bottom times bottom. You could simplify it by doing half the top and half the bottom. This is x to the negative 1/3. I'll never accept negative exponents, so you need to move it and call it this. Or maybe you could call it the 1/3 power is the 3rd root. So I'd say either of these answers. Okay, on to 7. You want to find its derivative. Again, dy dx. Again, you keep the constant out. And again, you do power, base, 1 less power. 1 less than negative 5 being negative 6. So that multiplies, gives you this. Again, I won't take negative exponents, so you probably need to move it to the denominator and make the exponent positive. On number 8, I would have to rewrite it. 3x to the negative 3. Now I could take the derivative using the power rule. Keep the constant factor out front. Power is negative 3. The base is x. 1 less power would be negative 4. So that's negative 12. No, 3 times 3 is not 12. Negative 9, x to the negative 4, which simply means negative 9 over x to the 4th. Okay, after 8 we move to 9. You're going to find its derivative by doing power base 1 less power. 3/3 less than 2/3 is negative 1/3. I would take it like this, or I would take the answer as a third root. I think either of those would be fine. Number 10. You're going to find the derivative, keep the negative 2 out. Actually, I'd have to rewrite it. Negative 2x to what power? Power over root. The power is 1, the root is 4. So if I keep the negative 2 out front and I do power, which is 1/4, x is a base, 1 less power. 4/4 less than 1/4 is negative 3/4. So that gives me a negative 2/4 or a negative 1/2. X to the negative 3/4. I'd take it this way, negative 1 over 2x to the 3/4. Or I would take it this way, power over root. So it'd be the root is 4 and the third power. Again, it's always power over root. If this was a multiple choice test, they're not going to have both those answers. It could be to your advantage to know they represent them in different forms. On to 11. Let's find this derivative. That would keep the 2/3 out as a constant factor. Power base 1 less power. So that first one's going to be 8/3 x to the 3rd. First term of derivative. The derivative of 5x is 5. So far I have this. Keep the minus. Now you're going to do power base 1 less power. So I think that's plus 3 over x to the 4th. Getting a little more challenging now. On 12, dy dx, you keep the negative 1/2 out. Power base 1 less power. That's a negative 2x to the 3rd, I believe. The next one, keep the 3 out front. Power base 1 less power. 3/3 less than 5/3 would be 2/3. So that would be plus 5x to the 2/3. And the derivative of 2x, or the slope of 2y equals 2x, is just 2. Now you could write it that way. You could also write it as this. Power over root. So it would be the 3rd root of x to the 2nd. These are equivalent. It wouldn't make a difference to me. But again, on a multiple choice test, it's to your advantage to know different ways of expressing them. On to 13. This time it's dy dr because you're taking the derivative with respect to r. But you still do power base 1 less power. So I think that would be negative 15r to the 4th. Keep the negative 5 out, power base 1 less power. So I think that's minus 10r for this derivative. On 14, I'm going to rewrite it before I take the derivative. Negative 3x to the negative 2 minus 4x to the negative 4. All I did was I moved the variables and changed the sign on the exponent. So now you're going to find its derivative. Keep the negative 3 out, power base, 1 less power. So that's 6x to the negative 3, or 6 over x to the third. Here I'm going to do, keep the negative 4 out, power, base, 1 less power. 1 less than negative 4 being negative 5. I think that's a plus 16 with an x to the negative 5. So something like these. Again, I don't want negative exponents. Okay, after 14 we come to 15. We're going to take the derivative, which we're going to call f prime of x. Keep the 2/3 constant, and you're going to do power times base to the 1 less power. 2 halves less than 3 halves being 1 half. I don't know if you know this, but any 2/3 times 3 halves is a reciprocal. So when you multiply reciprocals, you get 1. Or 6 over 6 if you like, which is 1. So you could either write it as x to the 1 half or the square root of x. Minus 3/4, I'm doing the next term. Power base is x, 1 less power. 5/5 less than 3/5 is negative 2/5. So top times top, 9, bottom times bottom would be what, 20, and x to the negative 2/5. So you could write it like this, which is probably the way they're going to have it. If you wanted to show off, you could call it, what would it be? It would be power over root, so it would be the 5th root of x to the 2nd. I think either of these would be the same thing. 16 is a little tricky unless you don't see it. I think on 16 I'd factor out a square root of 2. That would leave me with the 3rd root of x, which I'll call x to the 1/3, plus the 5th root of x, which I'll call x to the 1/5. See if we make that look a little better. 1/5. So now when I take the derivative, please notice that I'm writing y dy dx when I change it to the derivative. You're going to do, keep that out as a constant. You do power base, 1 less power. 3/3 less than 1/3 is negative 2/3. Here you're going to do power base, 1 less power. 5/5 less than 1/5 is negative 4/5. So I'd probably just do this. Plus 1/5, but the x is on the bottom to the 4/5. I think that would be the best way to express number 16. Okay, 17. A, B, and C are constants. So if you have like 5 is a constant. 5 is a constant times another constant is a different constant. And its derivative would be 0. You'd have to know that A, B, and C are constants. So if they are constants, you can keep the constant out front. So I'm going to have 4a is going to be out front. Then you're going to do power base 1 less power. That gives me 12a squared x to the 3a minus 1. Again, b is a constant, so is c. So you're going to do the power times the base to the 1 less power. So that would be plus 3bc. It's kind of standard to write them alphabetical. And if we check the answers on this PDF, hopefully this is the answer for 18.